If the Mariners move on from their coaching staff this winter, who could replace Scott Servais as manager? We'll answer that and more coming up here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, August 19th, 2024. This is Ty and Colby and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to be opening up the mailbag like we do here pretty much every Monday. But before we get into your Mariners questions, shout out to our title sponsor today, Prize Picks. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnMLB and use the promo code LockedOnMLB. That's all lowercase for a first deposit match up to $100. And if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, check out our Patreon. The link is in the description. And you can sign up for a free 7-day trial. We're going to kick off Mailbag Monday here with a question from Kyle. If the Mariners miss the playoffs, will they bring back Scott Servais? And if they don't, who would be a good candidate to replace him?
No idea. I don't know. As for who's a good candidate to replace him, I don't know. Like I don't have the list in front of me. I don't know who's out there. I don't track, hot, bench coaches and all that stuff. Like that's not what I do. So I can tell you that there are some in the Mariners organization who are really impressed with Christopher Negron, but it seems unlikely that you would fire Scott Servais to go to Negron, who's on his coaching staff. So it seems unlikely. And by the way, we should clarify, you don't technically have to fire Servais. His contract ends at the end of this year. He does have a 1-year option that we've heard about. So you could just not pick up that option. And it's a small detail because either way, he's not here. Right. They missed the playoffs. I think for the first time, there's a good chance that Servais is actually on the hot seat if he misses the playoffs, whether or not they just don't give him one more year. I think they might. But it's tough to say. Again, I do know that there are some in the Mariners organization who like Negron, but you fire Scott, you might be firing pretty much everybody in the org who would make that call. You might be firing, the front office people too. And so it's hard to imagine that if they move on from Scott, it'll be for somebody on his coaching staff. So, name to file away there, Christopher Negron. I know that a very popular managerial candidate for the last decade, pretty much since he retired, has been Raul Ibanez. But he has declined opportunities to be both a manager and a front office exec in the past. So would he change his mind for Seattle? I mean, I don't know. Maybe he's just in a different point in his life where he would consider it. But I imagine we'd hear them try to talk to him as well. But yeah, it's because the Mariners have been so stable, I haven't looked at or kept track of who's interviewed a lot over the last few years. But yeah, I think that, and by the way, just like saying, oh, just go get the bench coach for the Phillies or whatever, because they've been good for a few years. No, you're looking for the right person, the right fit, track record or whatever. Doesn't really matter. So yeah, it's tough to say. Right now, if I had to guess, I would say if they miss the playoffs, Scott is gone. As for who they would hire or who they would target, I don't know. But again, I know that there are a lot of people inside the organization who like Negron. And I know that pretty much everybody in baseball thinks that Raul Ibanez would be an incredible hire for a team in some role.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Raul would be my choice. But it also feels like maybe this team could use their own Bruce Bochy. But it's like, who is that? Right. I know Buck Showalter is a guy that gets thrown out there a lot, but it's like his last recent tour as a manager did not go well with the Mets. And you kind of wonder, like with Joe Madden, has the game just kind of passed him by? So I'm not really sure about that, and I just can't really think of anyone else. Cause again, like we're not scouting managerial candidates. That's not what I do here. If they do move on from Scott, like I'll dive deeper into it. Both of us will dive deeper into that, of course. But right now, I couldn't really tell you who's like, an up and comer that could be interesting for them outside of guys that are already within the Mariners organization. I think the Negron idea is interesting because like the thing that we need to keep in mind here is that even though that he's part of the same coaching staff, he might not share the same philosophies. He might not approach handling this clubhouse, managing the game the same way as Scott Servais does. On the whole topic of will they move off of Scott or not, if this thing does continue to go sideways, if they do miss the playoffs again this year, I think the answer is probably. Because again, we can have the discussion about whether or not this is his fault or how much of this is ultimately his fault, right? But it's sports. You fail now for the second year in a row after ending the drought to make the playoffs and essentially take that next step. That ultimately comes back and reflects on the guys that put the team together and the guys that spearhead the team, essentially, like Scott Servais. So, I'd be fairly surprised if he was the manager in 2025. Next question here from Jake, our good buddy at Raise the Trident. Logan has had a breakout year and has become one of the best starting pitchers in the game. He leads the league in quality starts and whip and is top 10 in ERA and walks. Outside of the stats, he's had multiple huge starts against division rivals. Do you think Logan has taken the lead in the ace debate?
Probably. I still do think that's a 3-horse race. Obviously, when you talk about like who's the guy who's most likely to dominate, it's probably George. We still know that George's ceiling is, best pitcher in baseball. Who's been the most consistent this year? It's Logan. And then you kind of like who's probably the least likely to blow up and have just disastrous starts. It's probably still Castillo. So, I think, Kirby was pretty good yesterday after back-to-back bad starts, including probably the worst start of his career. Logan was okay on Friday. He's been okay his last few times out, hasn't been great. Castillo, same, just kind of, but Castillo's actually been pitching really well. Right now, like, who do I want starting a game today? Wu or Miller, because they're pitching the best. But I do think that in terms of like who's the staff ace right now, like who gets the ball in game one of a playoff series, it's probably Logan. So yeah, I think by that definition, he probably is the staff ace, but I do think it's a legitimate 3-team race. And I think it's a 3-person race because they all do something a little bit better than somebody else. Like Kirby's ceiling is higher than anybody else's. Gilbert's the steadiest. And then Castillo's probably the one who's least likely to give up 11 runs in 4 innings. So now it's not likely that any of those 3 guys do that, but we have already seen George and Logan do that once or twice this year. And Castillo's bad starts are like 5 innings, 5 runs. So yeah, I think there's different points for all of them, but yeah, I would say Logan's probably the staff ace.
Agreed. All right, let's answer more of your questions in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is once again brought to you by Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps on Prize Picks, it's just you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000. Think Tyreek Hill will get more than 90.5 yards in week 1, or that Caleb Williams will throw for fewer than 236.5 yards in his debut? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this football season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today and use the promo code LOCKEDONMLB for a first deposit match up to $100. That's promo code LOCKEDONMLB on Prize Picks for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, run your game. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Tonight, you can catch all the action between the Mariners and the Dodgers on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. Let's get back into your questions here on Mailbag Monday. MC wants to know, if you divided up blame for the hitting struggles between the front office, coaching staff, and players, which percentage should each get? The players get the most of it. 50%, 60%. However you want to look at it. I don't really care, but they get the bulk of it because at the end of the day, the players have to execute. They have to put the work in. We know the deal here. I don't have to reiterate that whole thing. Front office is probably second because they're the ones that put the players together, right? They're the ones that put the players on the field. And then coaching staff, it's hard to quantify that, how much of an impact they're having on the hitters, if any, right?
I would say like 85, 10, 5 players, front office, coaching staff. And the reason it's low on the front office part, I'm sure you think, is because they didn't go out and acquire guys that like, oh, well, hopefully he bounces back. Like, no, they went out and got guys who legitimately produced last year, were very good last year and the year before that and the year before that. And some of those guys haven't worked at all. Mitch Garver, and some of them have worked out a little bit. Jorge Polanco. So it's like, no, I don't want to give the front office that much because again, it's not like they were like, oh, we can fix him. No, they went out and got guys who were producing and they just didn't. So that's on the players.
There are some instances though of like Dom Canzone, Luis Arias, banking on Josh Rojas, there's stuff like that.
Sure. But they moved on from Urias pretty quick. Like, it's not like
banking
they just
on Ty
tried to force that. Right. And, they moved on from Ty France eventually. So like, yeah, they banked on a couple of players like rebounding, that were already on their team. But when they went out and they put together this lineup, they weren't counting on, Mitch Garver to do something he's never done before. They weren't counting on Jorge Polanco to be anything more than he's been. Like, no, they put together a pretty good lineup on paper, a lineup that we liked on paper. And then unfortunately, those guys just didn't produce. So at the end of the day, did the front office err in identifying those guys as guys who should produce? Yeah, maybe a little. But to say that they're like anywhere close to equal with the players is a joke. This is on the players. Like, stop. I know because the players are the hardest to get rid of and the ones that we connect with the most. Nobody wants to blame them if they can help it. This is on JP. This is on Garver. This is on Polo. This is on Julio. Like, this is on those guys. Okay. So, but the guys who deserve the absolute least amount of grief for this is the coaching staff, but they're the easiest guys to get rid of. So they're probably going to end up bearing most of the blame for this. And they already have. We've already seen one guy get fired. Didn't really help. So
didn't at all.
Yeah, at least statistically. So yeah, I would say like 85, 10, 5 would be my split. Again, if the front office was like, well, Jesse Winker was good 4 years ago. Let's make him our starting left fielder. They didn't do that. So
because of like the Arias, Rojas, France, Canzone aspect that I brought up, probably make it more like 20% front office. And before we get into this next question from Jeff, there's the ownership element as well. Ownership obviously had a very large impact on what the Mariners front office was able to do this winter. Now, that doesn't excuse the Mariners front office from what they did do or failed to do with the resources that they did have available to them, or they made for themselves rather. But maybe it's more like ownership 15%, front office 20%, however you want to look at it. Jeff wants to know, besides the coaching staff and front office situation, what current players do you not see on the 2025 roster?
Next year for sure. We know Julio, Arozarena, Robles are going to be back.
Yes.
We know that.
Nope.
Cal's going to be back. We know that.
Yeah.
I think. Almost certainly he's going to be back.
Yeah.
Gilbert, Kirby, Castillo. I mean, Castillo's borderline, but because the no trade is still in effect, I'm going to say he's going to be back. I'd be shocked if they trade Miller or Wu. So I'm pretty sure JP will be back, although I wouldn't put him as a lock like I would have for the last couple of years. So Turner's not going to be back.
Yeah, Turner won't be back. I think Munoz will be back because they're still going to need bullpen help, and like I do think that they should look at a trade. Yeah, no, I would too. I absolutely would too.
But I do think he'll be back. Yeah,
especially if you're going to need to remodel this offense as much as you possibly can. Munoz is a good way to potentially do that.
At this stage, I'd be shocked if they tendered a contract to Rojas. So I think Rojas and Turner are gone.
Yeah.
I could easily see them trading Rayleigh, but I hope Rayleigh sticks. He's been
Polo's interesting because Polo looks like Jorge Polanco now for the most part for the last, I don't know, month
and a half.
Yeah.
But it's $12 million bucks.
But you could also, I don't know, having some continuity at second base for the first time in forever.
I might actually
seem like a bad idea
next year. And that's the thing too, right? Is that it's like, okay, well, we can keep Polanco, and now we can either go target a third baseman or a second baseman because we just put Polo like either spot.
Right.
So like if the season ended today, I would think they would pick up the Polo option or try and like work on like a multi-year solution.
I think they should, because all right, Cole Young's not necessarily kicking down the door. I know he's been better as of late. He's been hot actually, lately. But he's still not necessarily kicking down the door. And it's like, all right, what else are you going to do at second base? You're going to go trade for Brandon Lau, who's essentially the same idea as Jorge Polanco, and hope that he stays healthy.
I mean, maybe if you want to put Polo at third. But even then, okay, I still have DH.
Yeah, but I mean, if you don't pick up the option though, like what are you going to do at second base, right? So
right,
yeah,
but that's the thing is that like, for a fact you're going to need a first baseman and a third baseman.
Yes. So
if you don't pick up Polo's option, now you need a second baseman. So do you think you can rebuild the entire infield in one winter? Maybe, but. Isn't it easier to just pick up Polo's option? And by the way, if you do happen to, make a couple moves here, you could probably trade that contract. You're not going to get a ton, but you could probably get something for him. So, I mean, I think when I look at, who's not going to be here next year, Turner's a free agent, so he's not going to be here next year. I doubt
he might retire.
He might retire. Yeah, he's 39 years old. Rojas, I'd be pretty shocked if he got tendered a contract. He's just been really bad for a couple months here.
Yeah.
He's probably only going to make like $5 million, but again, because we know how this team kind of has to nickel and dime a little bit. There's only 2 players on this team that are like unrestricted free agents at the end of this year. It's Justin Turner and it's Jimmy Garcia. So those 2 guys, probably take them out. Rojas probably not getting tendered. The outfield, I think, is pretty much set, and Rayleigh is kind of the X factor there. Do they want to put him on the? Do they want to put him in first base? Do they just want him to be part of the outfield mix? There's a really interesting discussion to be had about what the Mariners do with Rayleigh and Haniger, because I assume that they're both going to be back next year. Like Haniger is going to pick up his option. Now the team could just DFA him, so it's not a guarantee. But
well, the idea that I had on Haniger was, you're going to have to attach something to trade him, but could you attach something, trade him, and bring back still a fairly significant contract? Where like the team that you're trading him to isn't taking on all $17.5 million, but you're essentially reusing that money for like a reliever. Like, could you get Raisel Iglesias?
Could they do another Robbie Ray for Mitch Haniger swap?
Right. But it's like for
I would say you're more likely to get that done with Garver, just because I think teams would be willing to look at Garver and be like, well, he's not hurt. He can catch. Like, obviously I don't know what they're looking at scouting wise, but they could just think like, this is a change of scenery guy who's only making 12 next year. Like, so I would say Turner, Garcia, Rojas. I think those 3 guys are definitely gone. And then, Canzone's got options, so you don't have to, it's just tough to say, because could they trade Canzone? Yeah. Could they trade Rayleigh? Yeah. Like, it's probably easier to say, like, who do you think is definitely on this team next year? Because that's Randy, Julio, Robles, Cal, the 5 starting pitchers. I think that's all I would put as definitely on this team next year. I would say Munoz is likely on this team next year, JP is definitely likely to be on this team next year. I would say, honestly, Garver's probably likely to be on this team next year. I would say Polanco's probably likely to be on this team next year. But yeah, I think, you're looking for a couple new infielders at the end of this year, and then we'll see if Rayleigh factors in at first, or maybe they want to trade him. Luke Rayleigh's kind of quietly having a very nice year, basically repeating what he did last year, with just more consistency. Like, I mean, it's 15% worse than it was last year, but it's not like he was a 160 WRC plus in the first half and a 90 in the second half. After the slow start, he's basically been like a 110, 115 WRC plus guy the entire season. So I hope they keep Rayleigh, but he's definitely an X factor in this.
Yeah, because I mean that's potentially your solution at first base.
Or it's
Right
your
there.
platoon partner with Victor Robles and right.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's definitely at bats to give him. And by the way, you still have this huge hole at DH.
Right. Now the best free agents or the best free agent pool is corner outfield.
Right.
So if you're trying to get better, trying to make the offense better, that's ultimately your goal at the end of the day, then
Rayleigh at first base makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you probably should add an outfielder.
Where are you most likely to find an impact bat? Where do most of those guys play? First base. So, and there are some free agents out there, first base free agents.
Christian Walker, Pete Alonso, etc.
Sure. All those guys have their own red flags, but yes, that is a path they could go. So at some point we'll have a whole episode talking about, who's coming back next year and where guys fit. The first base corner outfield thing is going to be fascinating. And Luke Rayleigh's a huge X factor there because the Mariners outfield on paper, pretty much set next year, but that's also their best chance to improve the offense is to add an outfielder. So it's kind of a catch-22.
All right, we got a few more of your questions to answer here in just a moment, but first a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard me talk a lot about FanDuel, which of course is America's #1 sportsbook. Well, I have something a little different for you today. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, that's LOCKEDON, to download America's #1 sportsbook. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Once again, tonight you can catch all the action between the Mariners and the Dodgers on the Mariners hometown broadcast with SiriusXM via the SXM app. All you have to do to find that is search the word Mariners. All right, let's get into your last couple of questions here on Mailbag Monday. John wants to know, if you had one do-over from the offseason, which would you do and what would have you done differently? For fairness, there has to be equal cost from the differences. I think mine's pretty easy here. I'm not signing Mitch Garver. I'm not trading for Luis Urias, and I'm essentially giving that $17-ish million to Matt Chapman, which is essentially what he's making with the Giants. That's going to be a 1-year deal. He's not going to pick up the player option this winter. Yeah. He's going to try and go out and get paid after having a really good year. So that's my answer. I think everything else essentially stays the same because I'm trying to think about it. I'm trying to think about which guys did they not land that were realistic this offseason that they didn't get that they should have.
Yeah, that's the big key there. It wasn't like there was a ton of great values in free agency this year. When you go back and you look at the list. I guess offer Teoscar Hernandez the qualifying offer and hope that he takes it. That's the one. But then you don't do but again, because he says one and it's bold and you name 2 things you would do, Ty.
Sure.
To me, the one swap that I would make, I guess, is I would not sign Garver and I would have instead signed Jock Peterson to be my DH. That would give me another middle of the order lefty bat. And obviously the DH is where he would play anyways. And it's tough to say I wouldn't do the Kelenic trade, even though that's probably our least favorite trade, because they needed the money. Unfortunately, they were in a position where they needed to clear payroll. So even if you want to say that Gino, and I mean, I know Kelenic hasn't been great this year either. So,
I mean, he's had moments, but this year,
let's be clear about this. The Mariners are not missing Jared Kelenic.
No, he's hitting 236, 290, 400 this year. That's an 89 WRC plus. I think that would be 3rd worst on the Mariners right now.
He's 20% worse than Luke Rayleigh. Right. Yeah. He's about 10% worse than Victor Robles. And I think he's about as good as Mitch Haniger. Yeah. For WRC plus. So the Mariners aren't missing him. So that's fine. Yeah.
Haniger has an 88 WRC plus. Yeah, Garver has an 84.
Yeah. The Mariners are not missing Jared Kelenic.
Yeah. I'm looking at the WRC plus leaders of the guys that are currently on the Mariners roster. Yeah. Jared Kelenic would be 3rd worst on the team right now.
They're not missing him. So as much as the idea behind that trade sucked, did that, or the fact that they felt they had to do that reason they did that suck? Yes. Did it actually hurt Seattle? No. Nope. Not at all, actually. Gino's been great for the second half. He was terrible in the first half. But again, they needed that money. If you don't make that Geno trade, you can't get Jock Peterson in my scenario. Unfortunately, again, it sucks that they had to do those things, but they did. So when I look at this, I say, what's the one swap I would make? I'd swap out Garver for Jock Peterson in terms of like AAV.
But by the way, let's make it clear here. The front office had to do those things, not the Mariners organization as a whole. They did not have to do those things. The front office, though, had to.
Jerry and Justin had to do that.
Yeah.
Because of the rest of the Mariners organization.
Yeah.
And by that, we mean John Stanton, who's a coward, by the way. So yeah, I would swap. You could do like Soler for Garver, but Peterson's having a better year. So yeah, I was looking at like who's made roughly the same AAV. And then I didn't want to go more than 3 years on top of the AAV because like it's easy to be like, oh, well, they should have just signed player X to 5 and 60. It's like, well, what 2 and 24 and 5 and 60 are really different, even though they're the same AAV. Peterson ended up getting 1 and 11, I think 11.75. So that's pretty close. That's the one swap I would make is I would do that instead.
Yep. And I know, Ty, you were so wrong about Matt Chapman. Oh, it's so funny that you said Matt Chapman. Whatever. I was wrong. All right. I was wrong. I'm not in this to be right. Just in this to talk about ball.
Sucks for you. Us Matt Chapman lovers.
Right. You totally had no thoughts about Matt Chapman this offseason.
What's real funny, real quick, what's real funny about Chapman is that our big concern about him was that he was really struggling to handle velocity.
Yeah.
Guess which team is worse in baseball at hitting 95 miles per hour plus? Seattle Mariners.
Oh, I'm aware. I don't even need to look at the numbers to recognize that.
Mm-hmm. If it's who's the worst hitting, period, just guess the Mariners. You're probably right.
Yeah.
Good chance you're right.
Yeah. Yikes. Last question of the day comes from Mark, and this one we're going to end on potentially a positive note. Is it wrong for me to feel that this team has another like 3-week stretch in them where they look amazing and they find themselves sneaking into the playoffs?
Like, could I see this team get hot for 3 weeks and get back in this thing? Yeah, I could actually. Because I literally have seen them do it. After this next, well, I mean, even starting this 3-game stretch, you look at who the Astros play, you look at who the Mariners play. Not that that's ever mattered, but you know, the Mariners are playing a lot of mediocre teams who literally just won 5 of 6 against them on this road trip. The Astros are playing a lot of playoff teams. So yeah, like if you're going to do it, like if there's a 3-week stretch, this is it right here, pretty much right after this Dodgers series.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what really makes it annoying, right? Is that like in the back of your head, as much as you want to trash these guys, and I did on the Patreon postgame show 2 days ago, absolutely trashed them. But in the back of your head, you're still like, yeah, like technically, yes,
they're capable. They're more than capable.
They are absolutely capable of going on a run. And it's just like,
but after watching them for the last 4 months, it's like, do I actually think they can do that, or they will do that? Rather,
no.
I think they can do it. I think they will do it though? No.
And
I
don't. Do it. Yes, absolutely.
I don't think they will do it though.
That's what makes it all the more annoying. And what's really annoying about it is that we've even seen little glimpses, like in this bad stretch of baseball.
Yeah,
because I saw them sweep the Mets and blow them out of the building.
I know exactly what's going to happen the next 3 days though. I know they're going to win this Dodgers series, if not sweep the Dodgers, because that's what the 2024 Mariners would do. They're going to reestablish. We're going to be like, oh, they're back. They're back. I bet you anything. Is it a day game on Wednesday?
No, they're all night games.
Okay. All right. Well, I was thinking if we were doing a post game. All right. Then on Thursday's episode, we're going to be like, wow, the Mariners look great in LA. Right. Clearly they're back. Right. We're going to have another one of those episodes. And then who are they playing on the weekend? The Giants?
Yeah.
Robbie Ray is going to pitch at some point in that series, I presume.
Ray and Snell are going to shove.
Right. Because of course, right. And like it's going to be over.
It's a very easy script to write if you're a Mariners fan right now.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Like I wouldn't be shocked if they beat the Dodgers. I really wouldn't. Just because again, they lost 5 of 6. Actually, if you want to go back even further, against Detroit twice and Pittsburgh, they went 2 and 6. And then on the other hand, they went 5-1 against the Phillies and the Mets.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the annoying part. That's the annoying part right there, because you're like,
that's why I have no idea how to talk about this team on this podcast anymore.
I saw them live. I saw them obliterate the best team in baseball since June 1st. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. I saw them obliterate that team in a 3-game set. And then I watched that same team go into Detroit and get 9 hits in a 3-game series.
Yeah.
Literally the next day. Like 2 days after, I watched them just destroy the best team in baseball for the last 2 months.
One series we're like, oh my God, they look amazing. Oh, they just extended Victor Robles. The vibes are amazing. 3 days later, they should fire Scott Servais.
The guys on Sunday Night Baseball were like, this is a World Series caliber team that we're watching right here. And a week later, they won 1 game since then. And we're like, it's over. They're toast. In 1 week, they went from tied for first place, this is a World Series contender, to like, yeah, season's probably over. So could they do the inverse of that again? Yes. And that's what makes it so annoying.
Yeah.
They won't die. Like, they won't let the hope die. So yeah, they're probably going to win this series in Los Angeles.
Oh yeah. 100%. They're
just to give you that little bit of hope.
They're going to sweep them. They're going to sweep them probably, because that's just what this team would do. And then they're going to get smoked by the Giants. All right. That is going to do it for our show. But before we get out of here, a reminder that Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. And now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV channels app. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty and Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Ty and Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. Head on over to Locked On Seahawks to get all the latest Hawks from Corbin Smith and the gang, and tell them Ty and Colby sent you. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.